Greetings around the world. Welcome back to St Blazey Model World. This time out we're applying weathering to the EFE single deck bus that we took apart in the last video. Railway guys, please stick around. There's lots more to come as we carry on with the work on baseboard 1, and there'll be a video about that out shortly. So, applying some weathering. I've done a few videos about weathering lately, and whether or not, every pun intended, you should actually do it is a matter of choice and taste. But we are going to weather this bus that we've dismantled, and it's time to make a start. So just before we get started, let's have a look at what I've got to work with. I'm going to do this without an airbrush and also without using any of the weathering powders and specialist weathering products that are available. Why? Well, because I believe that cost is an issue for a lot of modelers, and also we want to keep things fairly simple, and if you're only weathering 1 or 2 models, you really don't want to go to the extra expense of an airbrush and specialist weathering products. So let's look at what I've got to work with. I've got here a range of Tamiya paints, or a couple of Tamiya paints at least. X1, which is a black, and also, I'll just turn this slightly, there we go, XF72, that's a sort of muddy brown colour. And I've also got here a Tamiya product called X-20A, and that is a dedicated thinner for the Tamiya acrylic paints. Obviously I've got my model, I've got a few spare jars that I might mix up my paint dilutions in. I've obviously got my paintbrush ready, and I've also got a Scotch cloth. And at that point I can feel you having a sharp intake of breath and going, oh God, what's he about to do? Well, the first thing is that this model is lovely, but it's far too shiny. And I want a permanent weathering on this bus. So the Scotch cloth is going to be used to remove that. So let's start with the near side of the vehicle, the curb side here in the UK. And we'll use our Scotch cloth and just take off some of this shine. So that's all we're doing, working the Scotch cloth over our model to remove all of that shine that was on there. And we start to see the results fairly quickly, and you don't need to apply too much pressure. Wipe off the dust of the Scotch cloth, and that's where we're at currently. So I'll just repeat that process over the whole part of this model bus. So that's that stage complete, and I've wiped away now any residue left from the Scotch cloth itself and the dust that's on the model. And you can see straight away that we've removed all of that shine from most areas around this model, on the roof, both sides, and of course on the front and at the back. Now, of course, this is a permanent weathering that I'm going for by design. And as usual, please don't do this on your most expensive and most treasured possession. And if you're new to this, have a practice with something that really doesn't matter that much to you before you get into it. But straight away, by removing that shine, we've created a much more realistic look. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is apply some fuel staining, and on these buses the fuel cap is just here, and this area, this panel, would often be black in appearance or dirty in appearance with staining of overfilling of fuel, and I'm just using some diluted Tamiya X1 paint to do that, and I'm just going to drop it on with a brush, and then we'll wipe off any excess. And it's as easy as that. Whilst I have this X1 paint at the ready, I'm also going to apply a bit of dirt to all of the panel lines that you can see on this model, and we'll do that around all four sides using the same technique. Just really small amount of paint going on now, nice and delicately. I'm just touching the paintbrush onto the model, and because this is a diluted paint, the areas that I want accented with this finish will sort of naturally adopt themselves. You need a degree of courage and confidence with weathering, that things will work out how you intend them to be. And I'm just dropping it on bit by bit, not too much, nice and easy does it, that's the rule. And because it's a diluted paint, it's easy to remove if it goes wrong or I don't like the results, but that's what I'm aiming for. So we'll finish this all around the model and then have a look at where we're at then. So now that part of the process is complete, and I've applied the diluted X1 paint, acrylic paint, to every panel line that I think might pick up some dirt during the course of the running of the vehicle of normal operation. So this is the curb side. We'll just have a look at the front. I've just put a bit on the front there as well, especially at the bottom of the vehicle, of course, the part nearest the road. That would naturally attract dirt and grime. We've gone down the offside as well. And of course, just as the front, the back would also pick up quite a bit of dirt, so there it is. And I've actually also even applied just a smidgen to the roof as well, and that's been wiped away. Once it's started to set, just before it dries, just take off any excess, and that's the sort of effect that we've ended up with. The next thing to do is to take some brown coloured paint. Any brown coloured paint will do. I'm going with Tamiya XF72, and I'm just going to apply that to the areas around the wheel arches, but particularly behind each wheel arch at the back and at the front, because the road wheels and tyres will kick up the road dirt and dust and muck in that direction. So I'm just going to apply some there, and the same of course on the other side. And again, all being done with a paintbrush. There's no airbrush involved, all being done on the cheap, as it were. So this paint is not diluted, but I'm just going to put it on fairly sort of thickly like this, and it looks a lot, it looks horrendous, but what I'm going to do very shortly is wipe off most of this so that we are left with a weathering effect. So it looks like that now, and we'll just get a little bit of tissue paper and wipe that off and see how it looks afterwards. And there we are. Now I actually quite like that, and it is quite realistic of how these road wheels would throw the dirt onto this particular type of vehicle if it were the real thing. So that's the roadside dealt with, the offside. I've treated the near side, the curb side, in exactly the same way. It's purely random. I haven't gone for a uniform appearance, of course. And I've also created a bit of dirt gathering just around the first part of the entrance of the vehicle there as well. So that's okay, I'm quite happy with that. There is an area here though that does need addressing now, whilst I've got this light brown paint at use, and that is the windscreen. Now you can see the two windscreen wipers there, and what would happen of course is they'd sweep an arc of clear glass for the driver to see out of, but I'm going to use that paint to create some dirt outside of that arc, and again it's going to be very similar technique. I know where that arc would go. You can look at any model and work it out for yourself, and we'll put that in now. So there we are. That's as much as I want and as much as it really needs to be. If you feel that it's too much, well, just do it a little bit less when it comes to weathering your model. I'm doing this for me, not for anybody else. It's just to demonstrate techniques. But there we are, that's the windscreen weathered as well. And of course the windscreen would get weathered because it's in the front line, literally in the front line of that vehicle making its way along the road. Now this particular model, in keeping with the real vehicle, has a chassis with running boards on it, and you can just about make them out there on the camera, and they of course would pick up dirt and grime as well. I'm not actually going to weather those too much, but what I'm just going to do is paint them in the XF72 paint that I've just been using, and also apply a little bit of weathering to these wheel arches that you can see here as well. And that's that process complete. Exactly the same technique as before. Apply some paint, wipe it off as it starts to set, and remember that the trailing edge is the area that will pick up the most dirt and grime. Lastly, now I'm going to use a slightly darker paint. This is Tamiya X9, just to give a little bit of accent colour to the weathering that we've applied so far. Same technique, I'll put some paint on in random places, allow it just to set, and just before it dries we'll wipe away any excess. So here's our accent colour applied, just waiting for it to go off now. That'll take a minute or two and then we'll wipe away. And there you have it, a weathered example and how the model originally looked. They're the same serial number of EFE bus, but one perhaps has just come out of the paint shop or has been through the vehicle wash, whilst the other one has covered some mileage, and in a diorama they'd look great. That's it, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this one. Model railway stuff coming very soon, guys. Take care, as always, stay safe. Bye now from St Blazey Model World.